The last door before breakthrough. It began with exhaustion, months of effort, countless revisions, and a vision that felt so close, yet impossibly far. The team stood at the threshold of something extraordinary, but the final stretch was the hardest. Progress slowed, doubt crept in, and the breakthrough they had chased for so long seemed locked behind one last door no one knew how to open. Every major leap in business comes down to a moment like this. A moment where the path forward narrows into a single decision, a single obstacle, a single truth waiting to be discovered. And for this team, that moment arrived quietly, without warning, disguised as yet another setback in a journey filled with them. To understand how they reached this point, we must return to the weeks leading up to it. Their product had evolved, their ideas had sharpened, and the market had begun paying attention. But the final piece of the puzzle, the element that would transform their work from promising to undeniable, remained just out of reach. The technology refused to cooperate. Testing produced contradictory results, and the pressure from competitors grew louder with every passing day. Inside meeting rooms lit by tired screens and unfinished sketches, the team searched for answers. They dissected problems from every angle. They retraced their steps, reevaluated assumptions, rewrote lines of code that had survived months of scrutiny. Yet nothing unlocked the final barrier. The closer they came, the more elusive the solution became. But then something shifted. While reviewing data they had nearly dismissed, the team noticed a subtle pattern, small, consistent, easily overlooked. It wasn't a solution on its own, but it pointed to a direction they hadn't considered. A clue hidden inside the very failure that had frustrated them. This is where the reveal begins, because breakthrough doesn't come from force. It comes from recognition. The moment you realize the final door isn't locked, it's simply waiting for you to see the key that's been in your hands all along. The pattern they discovered was so subtle that at first no one believed it mattered. A tiny fluctuation, a repeated behavior buried inside mountains of data. Something that looked more like statistical noise than a clue. But as they isolated it, traced it, and ran deeper tests, the truth emerged. This wasn't noise at all. It was the system revealing the exact point where everything broke down. The reveal sharpened. The failure that had haunted them for weeks wasn't caused by randomness. It was triggered by a single interaction inside their workflow, an overlooked step that only resurfaced under very specific conditions. Most users never encountered it, but those who did unknowingly pushed the entire system into conflict, creating the contradictions that kept the team trapped at the edge of progress. Suddenly, the fog lifted. Excitement rushed through the room, but so did tension, because identifying the problem was only the beginning. Fixing it required confronting a deeper issue, a flaw tied to the very architecture the team had relied on for months, a flaw no one wanted to admit was there. As they dug deeper, the conflict began. Engineers argued over solutions. Some pushed for a quick patch to bypass the broken logic. Others insisted the entire module needed to be rebuilt from scratch. Product managers worried about timelines. Designers feared that altering this layer would unravel months of carefully crafted flow. And leadership, watching the clock and the competition, felt torn between protecting momentum and risking everything for long-term stability. Pressure thickened. The breakthrough was within reach, yet the path toward it required stepping directly into uncertainty. Every idea on the table carried consequences. Every solution came with hidden risks. And the emotional weight of the moment grew heavier as the team realized something painful. The final door wasn't blocked by technology alone. It was blocked by fear. Fear of breaking what still worked. Fear of losing the progress they had fought so hard to earn. Fear of making the wrong decision when the world was already watching. But clarity often arrives disguised as conflict. Late one night, after hours of debate, the team returned to the small pattern that started it all. They studied it from every direction, and in that quiet, exhausted moment, the real insight clicked into place. The flaw wasn't just a bug, it was a symptom. The symptom of a structural decision made early in the project, one that had been convenient then, but impossible to sustain now. And in that recognition, the path forward revealed itself. It wasn't simple, it wasn't safe, but it was the only way through. They would have to rewrite the core, not partially, not incrementally, but completely. A full reconstruction of the system at the exact moment the world expected them to accelerate. The conflict was no longer optional. It was the doorway to the breakthrough itself. And as they prepared for the rebuild, everyone in the room understood. The next step would determine whether this journey ended in triumph or in the silence of almost. The decision to rebuild the core landed like a shockwave through the team. They all knew it was necessary, but necessity didn't make it any less terrifying. Rewriting the foundation meant dismantling everything they had spent months constructing. Every feature, every test, every polished layer resting on top of architecture now deemed unstable. The conflict erupted instantly. Some feared the rebuild would introduce new problems they didn't have time to solve. Others worried the change would delay their launch so severely that competitors would seize the market before they even crossed the starting line. And beneath the arguments, a quieter fear lingered. What if the breakthrough they chased wasn't real? What if they risked everything only to end up exactly where they started? Tension filled every corner of the workspace, desks piled with sketches, monitors glowing with error logs, conversations whispered, intense, full of urgency. The team had reached the emotional peak of the journey, the point where exhaustion and ambition collided, where every choice felt like both an opportunity and a threat. Still, they moved forward. Engineers began mapping the old architecture, tracing decades of legacy decisions embedded in the system like fossils. They found outdated patterns, unnecessary loops, structures built during earlier phases when the product was smaller, slower, simpler. These fragments had worked well enough until the new idea demanded more than they could handle. As the team dissected the old system, their frustration turned into clarity. The flaw wasn't a singular oversight. It was the natural result of years spent building upward instead of outward, stacking new solutions on top of old foundations without ever confronting what lay beneath. The breakthrough didn't require force, it required honesty. And so, the rebuild began. They tore into the code base with a precision born from both fear and determination. They redesigned data flows, rebuilt critical modules, removed logic that had survived long past its relevance. Every change introduced new challenges. Every challenge revealed deeper problems. But step by step, the system transformed into something more aligned with the truth the breakthrough demanded. The emotional peak sharpened when the first full integration test failed. Errors filled the dashboard. Components misfired. Entire sections of the system refused to communicate. For a moment, silence gripped the room, a painful flash of déjà vu, as if all their fears had manifested at once. But then slowly, the team leaned back in, studying the patterns of the failure with steady resolve. The logs told a story, not of collapse, but of progress. The failures were precise, consistent, predictable. They weren't signs of impossibility. They were signs of a system being rebuilt correctly, finally revealing what still needed to be aligned. Hope returned. And as the team worked through the night, connecting the remaining pieces, one truth became undeniable. The breakthrough wasn't waiting behind some distant door. It was forming in the present moment, shaped by every hard decision, every risk taken, every flaw confronted instead of ignored. They were close, the closest they had ever been, and the next step would determine whether their rebuilt foundation could finally carry them into the future they'd been chasing since the beginning. They moved into the final phase of the rebuild with a steady determination, the kind that forms only when a team has faced every fear, every flaw, every doubt, and pushed through anyway. The new foundation was almost ready. The once fragmented system had taken shape, and the breakthrough, after months of tension and countless setbacks, now waited just on the other side of one final test. The room fell silent as the team prepared the full integration run. This wasn't a simulation or an isolated module test. This was everything, every component, every data flow, every interaction rebuilt from the ground up. Success meant transformation. Failure meant collapse. They launched the test. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the metrics began to move. Processes aligned with perfect timing. Data streamed through channels that had once buckled under pressure. Components that had refused to cooperate now communicated with seamless precision. Seconds passed, steady, quiet, flawless. And then the dashboard lit up with the result they had been chasing for months. Stability, speed, consistency, success. The room erupted, not with noise, but with a quiet, emotional release. Relief washed over the team. Months of frustration dissolved into something almost unreal. The final door, the one that had resisted them at every step, had finally opened. This was the climax. With the foundation rebuilt, the team launched the fully transformed product to users. What followed was immediate and unmistakable. Workflows that once felt slow now moved effortlessly. Features that previously struggled now performed with elegance. Customers noticed instantly. Conversations sparked. Praise spread. The product, once promising but incomplete, now felt inevitable, like something that had been missing from the market all along. And as adoption surged, the team understood the truth behind their journey. Breakthroughs aren't sudden. They're not magic. They're not luck. They're the result of every failure examined, every pattern noticed, every fear confronted, every risk taken at the moment it mattered most. The last door isn't opened by force. It opens when the foundation beneath it is strong enough to carry what waits on the other side. In the resolution, the company stepped forward with renewed confidence. Their evolution wasn't the result of brilliance alone. It was the outcome of persistence, clarity, and the courage to rebuild when the world expected them to quit. What began with exhaustion ended with transformation. Subscribe to join the journey.